WSDQ Dunlap, WEPG South Pittsburgh, The Copperhead, WSDT Soddy Daisy, Chattanooga.
The viewpoints expressed on Liberty Works Radio Network are not necessarily those of the network, its affiliates, or sponsors. This is Liberty Works Radio Network. Now live from coast to coast and around the globe. More real talk, the kind you want, on Liberty Works Radio Network.
Good afternoon. It's the Christian Revolt long overdue radio program. This is Nick Landholt, your host and facilitator. To call in, we're discussing health care today. As my listeners know from past shows, we know that we, the people, are going to need to organize in order to basically take back the control, the power that was taken from us in 1903. So we talk a lot about the problems, but we also provide a solution. And we have a special guest today, Jeff Kanter, who is going to be telling us about health care and what he has done about it. He's been kind of an entrepreneur in this area. This is a call-in program, so if you have a question or a comment for Jeff or myself regarding health care, please call us at the 410-848-9191 call-in number. And if you've got friends that you want to listen to the show, they can go to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website and click on the air button. So let's get to Mr. Jeff Kanter. Are you there, Jeff?
I am here.
Well, great. Appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and explain kind of what you've been doing for quite some time now. Give us, I guess, some background about yourself and how you got into the healthcare entrepreneurial field.
Well, I've been actually in the health insurance field for many, many years, over 30 years, and so learned a lot over time through that. And then all of a sudden the Affordable Care Act arrived, and it kind of put a whole jolt in the system where we've been kind of meandering our way into who knows what. We suddenly found ourselves with this whole organized thing that was thrust upon us, and a lot of people, figured out it was not going to be viable economically, and it certainly wasn't going to be good from the consumer standpoint of them being in control. But like in any chaotic situation, there's always opportunity, and so what was obvious was that we could get back to basics in the middle of this quagmire, and that's exactly what we set out to do with HealthExcellencePlus.com, was to allow you to be back in control. From every conversation we've had with consumers and every conversation that we've had with doctors, they prefer to be in control, and what they've found is over time, they're the last ones to be in control, and neither of them were consulted in terms of all this new version of healthcare world that was foisted on everybody. And now we have that opportunity, like you were promoting before, to take back control ourselves, because unless we do, it will not be fixed. The government will not fix it. No politicians will fix it. No companies will fix it. We have to fix it ourselves.
Well, I keep telling everybody who will listen that we've got, and I don't know how many people agree with me. They think they've got good guys in Congress, but I say we've got 535 traitors and cowards in Congress, and as you say, they're not going to fix it. They're going to continue to be the problem. I mean, I don't even know where the constitutionality of the government, particularly federal government, is in getting involved in the healthcare industry.
Well, there isn't any, so already there's trouble. But the truth of it is, even if we don't want to assign any negativity to any of the people in Congress, they've got one huge obstacle that confronts them on any bill they try to legislate, and that is that they're to appease every single person. So that's an absolute impossibility, because they're too fearful to pick a side or go with what they know would work out economically or whatever actually makes common sense, because somebody somewhere might be upset about it, so they want to kind of appease everyone. So that will never work, and therefore where the founders were so insightful to just force the government to operate more as a referee than actually be participants in the game itself. And we've let them wade in all over the place. There's not a facet of the healthcare world that doesn't seem to have their finger in it. And the truth of it is, you have the options. It's like I can either go to a brand name gas station, or I can go to some local, locally owned one with some off-brand name on it, I have the option to go there. And the same stuff exists in the healthcare world. There's plenty of great, fantastic things you could tap into that lets you get escape from all those controlled entities that they try to force you into working with.
Well, your the biography that I posted on my Facebook page announcing the topic for the show and your name says you're a serial entrepreneur who saw this opportunity to put libertarian ideals into action. What is a serial entrepreneur?
That's somebody that keeps trying until they get it right, basically, when it comes to business. And the reality is that, over time, as you're younger and then you age and so on, and I historically found myself not having a corporate job anywhere, so I was always creating my own businesses. Some I sold, some I just put out of business, some kind of ran their course. They were good for a couple of years, and then that's kind of how I gravitated into the insurance industry because there was a lot of good stability in that, and you really were a lot of tools you could use to help people. I was constructing methodologies to become your own bank with insurance platforms, which was popularized by Dr. Ron Paul through some activities. He was engaged in that activity surfaced. And so there were a lot of areas to kind of help people become more liberated and in more control themselves. But that was a huge omission within the healthcare industry. I was kind of having to hold my nose when it came to that because those were the areas where we really could not find a methodology to be freed of it other than just paying cash for yourself, which is not so bad on little stuff, but hard to imagine if you have a heart attack, you're going to pay out of your pocket for that. So you really need a way to do it. And now with this new world that we're in today, we're able to do that for a change. So it's very exciting for sure, Nicholas.
Well, the technology that we have with the internet and social media and what have you, I really don't see the need for government involvement in something that, as we agree on, is unconstitutional. But you're no stranger to politics because it appears I've only been, I've been a quote-unquote Libertarian Party member only for a couple of years now. But I guess my libertarianism goes back to the 90s, which is about, you actually ran a campaign for a libertarian presidential candidate. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, I was involved in two campaigns. Back in the 90s, I was involved as the campaign manager with Irwin Schiff, who did a great job of helping expose some of the fallacies within the tax code and some of the whether or not constitutionality of things were in place there. So it made for some very interesting events, and we had some very interesting radio shows and appearances, to be sure, and definitely woke a lot of people up. And it's just been a gradual process on a variety of things that have awoken people. But then more recently, we were the medical consultants on the Gary Johnson campaign, who was the last person, actually the last two times the Libertarian presidential candidate was Gary. We were in this most recent run of his, we were the medical consultants on his organization.
Okay. Well, and when we talked before the show, I had mentioned that I cut my teeth on the income tax issue with Irwin Schiff back in basically 96. That was the last time I filed, and basically the last time I stopped paying as well. So Irwin was a good guy, and the government, unfortunately, from what I could tell, basically made him an example by basically making him a political prisoner.
They did pretty much. I mean, one of the events that we participated in one of the national conventions, I introduced him as the guy we were all following behind that was about to cross the minefield ahead of us. And we were all going to make sure we stepped in exactly the footprints he made. And he had the gall and the nerve and the chutzpah to be able to be the one to go out there and do that and take all those slings and arrows. And they definitely abused the guy there at the back end of his life. But on the upside, again, it brought a lot of people out of the darkness. His son that he had, Peter, has been fantastic.
Peter,
been a spectacular guy out there, keeping the word alive. He actually just redid a book with his father that was an excellent kind of a cartoon-like book that explained how the whole government and the Federal Reserve and everything worked. So there's been a lot of good stuff in his wake, thankfully.
Well, let's. How far back does this government involvement in the healthcare industry go?
It's a very long history. You know, I didn't really understand myself until I'd been involved for some time and began to really delve into the back end of the things as it became more onerous. But it goes back to the 30s and 40s when there used to be, historically, there was charities much more prevalent than today as far as like taking care of the indigent or people that were ill or whatever. But then on top of that, there were lodges. So a lot of people heard of the Fraternal Order of the Eagles or the Knights of Columbus and all these different fraternal organizations. And historically, one of their main operational features was that it provided you with a doctor. So you would join the local lodge, and they had a doctor on site that was there pretty much all the time. You could see as you needed to, and you didn't have to pay for it because you were a member of the lodge. But then when the AMA came along and some other individuals, which we could go way off into a tangent on all of that, but they wanted to kind of cartelize a little bit the doctors, create some levels of licensure and other ways that they can kind of control that and in their mind elevate the profession and allow them to make more money. But of course they wanted to trim the supply a little bit. So one of the first orders of business was to terminate the lodge practices. So they took away the grassroots bottom-up way that healthcare was evolving because they wanted to operate from the top down. And little by little, the two parallel lines off by 1 degree, all those years later, look where we are today. So that's exactly, and again, if we kept it going like it's been trying to do in its own fashion, it'll become almost a de facto single payer like Medicare is, because you've got the government paying 80% of the bills, and you've got a select few companies that get to help you pay that extra 20%, and there's no other choices or options to the consumer, and it's kind of single payer with just a couple people delivering the goods on the front end, meaning those few companies that pay to do supplements or Medicare Advantage plans. So that was the same things have been evolving on the normal practice, because you remember you used to have the doctor come to your home, and they took care of you and you paid them, and now suddenly I'm going to their office and I have a little copay. Well, what was wrong with that doctor coming to my house situation? Why was that bad that now I need to be doing this other thing over here? And seemingly I don't have that option on the face of it to call and under my normal set of circumstances say, well, no, I want the doctor to come to my house. They'll laugh in your ear. But there are doctors willing to come, and there's a lot of stuff you can do. But again, that takes the person the responsibility of walking away from the existing situation that they know is not good, but just cease to take it any longer. And like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, you've got the ruby slippers on right now. All these free market tools you need exist today everywhere in the United States for the most part.
Well, is it the individual able to walk away, or do they need maybe to have some co-ops or that type of situation?
It's definitely going to, unless you're extremely good health and you really don't feel like there's going to be any problems in your health into the future, you could mostly do as a cash pay patient if you knew how to handle that. Of course, that's going to take some education, and that's part of what we try to do with what we're doing. But for most people, they do have a big fear, and rightfully so, because it's a kind of unknown who's going to be the one to have a heart attack out of all of your group of friends type of a situation, and one of them probably will, but no one really knows who, so as a consequence, they're going to want to have something to pay for any of those large bills. So the best of both worlds is the way we've configured it, and again, only because of the set of circumstances and all the tools that exist in many respects, although the Internet, like you mentioned before, facilitates all of this stuff, was that you're able to be in control from the front end, whereas I get to see who I want. I get to be kind of in charge of my whole situation in conjunction with my doctor. But when I have to have money to pay for large bills, it's delivered to me as the consumer, as opposed to me walking into a doctor or hospital's office and say, well, here's the card of the company that I'm subservient to, and you have to pay attention to them in lieu of me. No, you walk in and say, look, I'm a cash pay patient. I have a Visa card. One of the tools we use has a Visa logo on it. Everyone takes that. You go where you want, and you say, look, you tell me what the deal is. I'm the cash pay patient here. I'm in charge of my destiny and all my bills in this fashion. And then when they deliver you the bills, in our particular situation, you're going to pay either $500 or $1,000 of that bill, but then the rest of the bill, the funds are going to be delivered to you personally so that you can go pay them so they continue with the continuity that you're the person in control. They don't need to realize you have a support system behind you. So that's what you were talking about, the idea of having that co-op, because the way we operate, we use medical cost sharing, which is very similar to the idea of a co-op.
Well, we're talking with Jeff Kanter of Healthcare, And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about single payer, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? We'll be back.
Is Liberty Works Radio Network enlightening you to the real problems we face in our constitutional republic? Has it helped you to better understand what has to be done to save America from becoming a third world nation? If so, do your part in spreading this voice of truth and enlightenment to your fellow Americans. Join the Liberty Works Radio Network Fellowship. Go to www.libertyworksradionetwork.com for details.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
And now, for the Institute on the Constitution, here's Michael Anthony Peroutka with The American View.
All law and all lawmaking is religious in the sense that it derives its authority to act from something outside of or above itself. In this country, that something that our law is based on is the Bible. This is clearly apparent not only in the text of the Declaration of Independence, but it's also demonstrated in the texts of our earliest covenants, constitutions, and charters. And this fact is known and recognized by Christians and non-Christians alike. For example, a 1982 Newsweek magazine cover story headlined, "How the Bible Made America," said that historians were discovering that the Bible is our founding document. In our country, until relatively recently, God's Word, His law, was the standard used to judge whether man-made statutes were just or unjust. Now, this view is taught in Scripture itself. It is also taught in the writings of St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, and the great British jurist Sir William Blackstone, and by the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. In his famous Letter from a Birmingham Jail, Dr. King said this, "A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law." Dr. King went on to remind us that we should never forget that everything that Adolf Hitler did in Germany was legal. The word legal he placed in quote marks because, of course, what Hitler did was not legal since it violated God's law. Any act of a lawmaking body isn't law if it isn't moral, and it isn't moral if it isn't biblical. This is Michael Anthony Peroutka for Institute on the Constitution, bringing you The American View.
This is Rob McQuay for the Institute on the Constitution, and you've just finished hearing Michael Anthony Peroutka's commentary on The American View. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of this radio station, and we welcome any comments and suggestions you may care to offer by emailing us at michael@theamericanview.com. If you'd like to learn more about the Institute on the Constitution's work, you can find out more about who we are and what we do at theamericanview.com.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
Thomas Jefferson, in his writings, left us many warnings about corrupt bankers and politicians. I place economy among the first and most important virtues, and public debt as the greatest of dangers to be feared. To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our choice between economy and liberty or profusion and servitude. If we can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of caring for them, they will be happy. What our country needs is a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, and which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it had earned. Jefferson warned that ignorant and free can never be. He was a true defender of the American dream.
The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
Mother Teresa couldn't do it all, but she gave her all. Compassion. She didn't just visit the sick and poor. She moved in with them because they needed help. Mother Teresa couldn't do it all, but she gave her all. Compassion. Pass it on.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
Now live from coast to coast and around the globe, more real talk, the kind you want, on Liberty Works Radio Network.
And we're back on Christian Revolt, long overdue. Our call-in number, if you have a question for our guest, Jeff Kanter, who is talking about the healthcare industry and his actual businesses, which he sort of the subtitle is a healthy care strategy. The number 410-848-9191. Jeff, tell us before we go any further, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you and your organization?
It's very simple. They would go to our website, healthexcellenceplus.com, and the word plus is spelled out. There's a number of videos. There's some information they can get off of there to download. There's some webinar to attend. So there's a variety of resources over there. And they're going to want to see why you were describing it as a healthy care strategy, because it's exactly that. I mean, that really is the pretense of anybody's health world, should be to prevent health in the first place. And if you think about insurance in general, whether it's for your home or auto, even for your health, it's more designed around the idea of something going wrong, and then it steps in to help. Well, that's okay with your house or car, because that's when I need them. But for my health, I should have prevented the heart attack, not suddenly have one to figure out I've got this great insurance I've bought. That's the wrong procedure. So at healthexcellenceplus.com, you'll see how it's 5 tiers of a healthy care strategy, and also the idea of making it comprehensive, but at the best of all is to make it super, super simple. So the person literally only has to be able to make a quick phone call to find out information for whatever it may be that's in any aspect of their health. And if something really bad happens, the most they're going to end up paying is $500 or $1,000. So that's where they'll find it.
Okay, so that was one more time the website.
Certainly, healthexcellenceplus.com.
Okay, great. Now, let me ask, you mentioned the videos at healthexcellenceplus.com. Do you go, or does the company, or you've got some other companies that, an umbrella group, I guess, the My Academy of Health Excellence. Do any of the groups that you're involved with, do they go into explaining, say, Big Pharma and the fact that, their business is to keep us sick?
Well, in some respects, it does. We're actually part of a larger situation, which is the whole health freedom hub, essentially, of all of the things that relate to your health. So when you're getting to what you're talking about, there's media coverage, there's a marketplace to buy products and services, there's a social community to be able to meet and fraternize with other doctors and other consumers. So it's really kind of the doctor-patient relationship writ large. And then there's healthexcellenceplus.com, which is a product that actually helps you pay medical bills and go and see a lot of that stuff and get it done, in other words. So it's kind of basically like health insurance, in other words, in that overall world. But yes, there is reporting and information about that, because part of you being a responsible and knowledgeable consumer is you need to know a lot of information. But you need to find out about it in a very cohesive and simplistic manner, and so that's kind of the way this thing's been built up. But as a consequence, there are a lot of particulars, because there's organizations that market supplements or talk about them. There's organizations that discuss what's going on with vaccinations or with prescription pills and all the rest of that stuff. So, yes, there's a place for that in what we're doing for sure, because it's all part and parcel of you being a free market medical consumer. Is I need to be knowledgeable, I need to be informed, I need to have assistance when I want it, but most importantly, I need to be in control. And what we all prefer, and luckily because of us being so free market oriented, the prices are low by comparison, very low by comparison.
Well, I find, and you, having been in the libertarian movement for decades, we find that big government doesn't want an educated populace.
Well, I don't know if they don't want it as much as it's not part of their business to do that. They're trying to deliver the goods, so it's up to you, like the old saying, caveat emptor. You really need to be in charge in everything. And it's funny, that's a Roman saying, and it's as current today as it was back then. And so, but what we're really doing is, because what the Internet affords is all these separate organizations around the country that have all been doing excellent stuff, but in their own little world or in their little silo, are now finally getting to cross-pollinate, share, educate consumers, wake more people up, and help drive that business, which is the way we take it back control. Because you're going to need someone to go to. If I'm going to give up, buying at a big box store, I can't just go cold turkey and have nothing. I actually have to replace those needs and services elsewhere on a more localized basis. And so that's what this is facilitating. That Health Freedom Hub allows all of those organizations to kind of have that water cooler to hang around where everybody gets to meet each other, but we've all come with the same thought process in mind. The consumer wants to save money, they want to be in control, and the doctors want to practice medicine, and they don't want to have their practice interfered with. So we're all the perfect marriage the way we've come together here.
Okay, let's shift to the term single payer. I'm wondering whether the ACA, Affordable Care Act, or more commonly known as Obamacare, and of course, I've always said it doesn't matter who's in control of the White House or Congress, the Demonicans, as I call them, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, they're both in on this together. Had they been trying to steer us to what is called single payer?
Well, there definitely have been factions within there, at least in recent times, that want that type of a thing. I mean, you can see Bernie Sanders and some of these people ran on that pretense. So there's definitely a thought process there. Now, some of the people don't understand what it would bring or mean, so they, are well-meaning. They definitely want something good for everybody. It's not that they're trying to be bad. But the problem is that, you have to use everybody else's money to make these things happen. And just as that quote was read by Jefferson in the little intro there, if you're taking the money away from labor, you're going to cause problems because you're penalizing the successful person who suddenly has a disincentive to be successful any longer. And then you're just making the person who you're just helping all along seemingly become completely dependent on your help, whereas they don't even learn or even at some point even want to try to help themselves any longer. So it will not be a good situation. And then, of course, the bigger problem is it creates a lot of layers because, as I described before, there was you and your doctor. Well, now there's you, and then there's all these other different layers and all these other interferers, and then your doctor. So how in the world is that ever going to get cheaper? And every time one more person wants to put their 2 cents in, it gets more convoluted, and, you go from 4 pages of informational regulation, as it were, to 4,000 pages before you know it. So you're better off when it's just you and your doctor. It's nice and simple that way. It's very hard for that to get complicated. So it won't be a good situation, but there'll be a continual drive forward as long as that seems to make some sense to people.
Well, sir, it's, you were talking about the layers and going from 4 pages to 4,000. It reminded me of the income tax code, whereas I guess when it first came out, and not 1913, is long before that. Now you look, I remember when I was working with Irwin's group, the tax code that I got was like, I guess that's about 2.5 inches thick. I mean, it's ridiculous. And now that's shifting over into the healthcare world.
Well, just as I said, the more, if you have a job, you want to seem productive and you want to seem useful and needed. And so if you're a bureaucrat or some sort of agency writing regulations, and ideally all the rules have been written and there's kind of nothing to do tomorrow, that can't happen. I got to come up with something. And there's always one more little layer to dig down. Is the light bulb bright enough? Is the seat tall enough? I mean, you can get into all the weeds, and it's not going to make anyone's life simpler. And from every other area of the country how much money has to be spent to stay up with regulation and do compliance and paperwork. And, once doctors have told me, once they had more people in the front office than they had doctors in the back, they knew they were in trouble. And it just added a ton of cost. And then, of course, now they get driven to keep up with that overhead, so doctors can't spend time with you. It's 15 minutes, next. It's building a horrible environment, and, that's okay for trying to get widgets out the door quicker and better, but we're talking about somebody's health, which is a very involved situation. No two people are alike. Some have great health and others have mixed health, and all of it needs to be dealt with, and you can't do that in 15 minutes, next type of a mentality.
Well, what happened, do HMOs, do they still exist? I haven't heard that term in quite some time.
You don't hear about it too much. That was kind of an idea of single-payer mentality, too, of sorts, where you were going to kind of stay within a certain health maintenance organization. And, they didn't really pan out like everybody thought. So everything just kept gradually drifting along to kind of where it ended up when they just put it on steroids by coming out with the Affordable Care Act. And so you don't see that. What's actually happened is kind of the newer corporate mentality of stuff where the hospitals are buying up other hospitals, which are buying up local doctors' practices, so that becomes just like one singular entity. And some of them are actually selling insurance policies as a front end to their hospital. And then here now, just look what happened with CVS and Aetna. So now the insurance company's going to own the pharmacy, and they're going to be making money on both ends. And are they going to control who you buy pharmacy from? Will you get to go to Walgreens, or is there going to be some sort of a quid pro quo going on around all of that stuff?
Well, quid pro quo, is there any kind of a or can you see if there's some kind of conspiracy between big pharma and doctors and hospitals and corporations like, CVS and Walgreens, what have you, to try to get this all under a universal health care type Canadian, everything's free, but you got to wait, forever to be seen?
No, we're too fractious of a country compared to others for that to be overtly happening, but it is happening kind of in a innocent way because everybody's just trying to get market share and all the rest of it, and one of the ways to grow is to, if I can't invent the technology, I can buy some young upstart that has it, or if I only have locations on the West Coast and I want locations on the East Coast, I buy out an East Coast company. So all of that stuff that's happening is pretty natural. But the problem becomes they're functioning in cahoots with the government helping with regulation and legislation that favors those large entities because it's easier to regulate and manage a few companies than to try to manage tens of thousands of them. And large companies can have the wherewithal to pay for people to keep up with regulatory paperwork and whatnot, whereas a small company just finally has to go out of business in the end. So either they get bought out or driven out, and in the end you get down to a handful of players, and then suddenly choices get to become rather poor. And as we've seen of late with Google and Facebook and some of these other companies, do they have an agenda of their own? And now suddenly everybody's going through this channel, yet you're all being propagandized all day. And similarly, could that start to happen in the medical world, where favored players, favored treatments, favored medications are the rule of the day, when new technology or other countries that aren't so limiting like we're becoming that way create new ways to cure diseases, but we're all locked in on that old one because it's an old buddy crew going back and forth, and you and I are going to be toast in that equation. And as there's a great saying, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're definitely on the menu. And you can be darn sure we've been on the menu for a long time, Nicholas.
Well, I remember when Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary, and lots of people jumped on his train, and then I'm sure he was vote frauded in California. I've been involved in vote fraud for about 20 years, or at least exposing it. And then all of a sudden he endorses Hillary. So he didn't want to lose that place at the table, like you say.
That's right, yeah. So no, there's a lot of that shenanigans that goes on. He was hurt. This has been going on for decades, whether it's local election fraud, ballot access on a national or statewide level. There's all sorts of things that have been afoot to thwart anybody that's straying from, the protected class. And when I say that, it's people that are already, sitting in the gravy train, and who wants to give up, you're the number one retailer, you're the number whatever. You don't want to lose that. And if you have ways to make that stay in place, it isn't necessarily unethical. It's rather immoral, let's say, where you're using the tools of government, but you can certainly understand the reason to try to do that. But, again, when it comes to our health and the fact that we have the ability to avoid that happening to us, and we pretty much do in most things, but, we just tend to lemming-like go along with the flow. But when it comes to your health, it's pretty foolish, and, shame on you if you let yourself be completely walled off from the chance of being cured. and just find yourself micromanaged to your demise, because hospitals and all those types of organizations only make money when they're doing service to you. You know, they don't make any money when you don't come there.
Right.
And by the same token, you know, if you're not on any medications, you're not making money. They're not making money either.
We'll be back after the break.
Is Liberty Works Radio Network enlightening you to the real problems we face in our constitutional republic? Has it helped you to better understand what has to be done to save America from becoming a third world nation? If so, do your part in spreading this voice of truth and enlightenment to your fellow Americans. Join the Liberty Works Radio Network Fellowship. Go to www.libertyworksradionetwork.com for details.
There's a battle going on, a war for your soul. It's a devil's deal, it's mind control. They want you to believe that you have no hope. They're counting on the fact that you are a dope. Well, they tell you the rules, tell you what to eat. They know that you won't question, they know that you don't read. We've lived a lie for way too long. It's time to know right from wrong. No matter what they told you all, courts and judges cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw, because courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw, because courts cannot make law. Congress makes the laws and the courts make none. That's in the Constitution, it's in Article 1. Look it up, read the words, use your own two eyes. Know it well, mark the spot, have it memorized. Tell your children, tell your mama, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbors if you wanna be free. You won't learn the truth in government schools. It's up to you to know the rules. No matter what they told you all, courts and judges cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw, because courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw, because courts cannot make law. Oh, Dred Scott was not law, you see. They ignored the court then, and so should we. Slaughterhouse and Mickey Mouse and Roe v. Wade. Opinions are not how law is made. That's not the way that our founders planned. Now wise up and rise up across the land. Spread the word so everybody knows this emperor has got no clothes. No matter what they told you all, courts and judges cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw, because courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw, because courts cannot make law.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
People are surprised to learn that natural family planning couples have a lower divorce rate than couples who use other methods of family planning. NFP couples report better communication that improves marital intimacy and respect. For information on how you and your spouse can learn natural family planning in English or Spanish, see the Couple to Couple League's website at ccli.org or call 800-745-8252.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
Dad, where did the clouds come from?
Well, buddy, that's a good question.
Is this worm a boy or a girl? Why are carrots orange?
Actually...
Dad, why don't you have any hair on your head? How do birds fly? Why is dirt brown? Well, why can't I fly? Are we there yet?
You may not have all the answers, but if they're comfortable coming to you now when the questions are small, they'll come to you with the bigger questions later.
Dad, can I ask you something?
Give your family everything. Give them your time.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting. Now live from coast to coast and around the globe. More real talk, the kind you want, on Liberty Works Radio Network.
We're back on Christian Revolt Long Overdue. This is Nick Landholt, your host and facilitator. Our guest today is Jeff Kanter, and we're talking healthy care strategy. His website is healthexcellenceplus.com. A lot of information there, folks. I urge you to go check it out. Here's in our last segment. I don't know if you have anything in particular you want to make sure we cover today, Jeff, but I see one of the subtitles or sections on the website. And again, folks, that is healthexcellenceplus.com. You talk about solving the health insurance cost problem for America. We talked about the fact that I guess government started to get involved back in the first half of the 20th century. I, as a candidate in 2018 on the Libertarian Party of Texas ticket, one of my positions is to get the health care back into the hands of, as we agree on, individuals, but also the churches. I know a lot of Christian churches, built hospitals and what have you a long time ago, and the government kind of, I guess, gradually took those over. Is that kind of how that worked, or what?
Well, just again, economies of scale, different companies and organizations is a good example. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, as we speak, and there were a lot of different organizations. There was a Jewish hospital, there was some Catholic ones, there was a Lutheran, there were a whole bunch of different ones. And little by little, the Cleveland Clinic and other big entities of that ilk just kind of consumed all of those, and all because of different situations that made their doing business more difficult as they try to consolidate, their power through legislation, other things that took place behind the scenes. It kind of pushed them away, and then also the continual drumbeating for them to give up any religious ties, or at least to hide them behind the curtain and maybe just be having a religious name but not actually have anything overtly religious going on or proselytizing or anything, which was a part of some of the charitable organizations in the past, and that was kind of what you knew you were getting into when you went to such a place. But they just kept trying to make it uniform and one-size-fits-all mentality, and after a while, and I told you we really kind of were down to that. Just think about coffee from like our prior generation. Anywhere you went, they just had a cup of Joe, and that's what they called it, and it was just basically one flavor, and then eventually there was decaf. But now you go to the grocery store, and there's a whole aisle devoted to coffee, and there's more permutations than you can imagine. And so as it turns out, that's how many different kinds of coffee it requires to placate America as opposed to one-size-fits-all. So by not allowing the medical industry to operate like the coffee business, we've really crippled ourselves dramatically, because being involved like I am, I've seen so much innovation and so many amazing things happening that have either been quashed for one regulatory reason or another, or just can't seem to get going because the cost of breaking out is too high, or things that could be done more naturally. But it's very hard to make money just helping someone fix their diet than to sell them a bunch of pills and some surgeries or whatnot. So a lot of great stuff is being stifled because no one's had the opportunity to learn about it. And so education, lo and behold, as usual, is one of the most important aspects in your life, is knowing about things. And when you're given a tipped scale and only a filtered information that you're only privy to, it's like listening to one kind of a network broadcast only and not listening to all the others, so you can get an array of opinions. You start to believe that one singular voice is the truth all the time. And there's so many options and so many great entrepreneurial and individual practitioners that are really out there doing some awesome stuff, and they just need the help to be found, because they'll flourish all by their lonesome as long as they get to be found. That's the real key. Well,
and one of my I don't know what the term would be, but not idiosyncrasy, but one of my goals is to help get the word out about entrepreneurs such as yourself, companies that are flying under the radar. And sure, they may be thriving enough for themselves, but there's tons and tons of people out in America that are, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is becoming so wide because the government is controlling the market so that we don't know about folks like yourself. So, how do we, let me ask, how do you get the word out about what you're doing and try to increase your business?
People like the idea of having control and freedom in the end. They think on the surface, I wish the government would do this or that for me because they basically want something. But what they really want is to have control or to get what they need or prefer. And so that is all available. So, but the problem is, how do I have time to know about it? I'm so swept up in my day-to-day routines and work and everything else, I can't become intelligent enough to pick out all of the different information. So basically all we've done is facilitate a place for all these separate elements to come together. We're able to help pay for a lot of that stuff depending on how you're engaging with it. But the best is it's a place to network and meet like-minded people and cut out all the distance it would take to normally find each other. It's almost like going to a Match.com. You put in your right profile, and bang, you're connected to somebody that's going to be pretty close match to you in certain respects than just aimlessly, doing 5-minute speed dating at a bar. So this is kind of what we're making happen. We're giving you a really fast way to connect. We built a concierge into our product so people can literally call up and say, hey, I need a different kind of a doctor. I was told I should get an MRI, but I'm assuming I can get a better price. And that's the whole idea. If you take responsibility, you're going to be much smarter, more economical, but you don't want to have to Google something and get 15 million responses. I need a couple concise things that I can decide on myself, or I can confer with my doctor. We can make a quick, sharp decision. The prices are going to be really, really good. I can go anywhere I want, so I'm not restricted by any outside person. And that's what really everybody's trying to accomplish. So that's all we've really done in certain respects. We've facilitated the ability for the consumer to be the free market person they've always really wanted to be, even if they didn't realize it.
Does your group have accounts or account reps or what have you that people can talk to about what's going on and the different plans that you offer?
We have a very hands-on approach, and that's a big, big dramatic difference, because from when you just call in to get some inquiries or you become a member, and even depending on where you live, we have people locally that can help you. And then, of course, we've got all the doctors that like to work with us because they want to be freed up in their office, so they're very big on recommending us to their patients. So we've got doctors, as I said, you can go anywhere you want. But if you're like, well, I'm new in the area, or I'm thinking I'd switch doctors, or the doctor I see always just tries to write prescriptions for me, or whatever kind of doctor you're trying to find, we'll help you connect with the people that are looking for you to show up, and they are eager to help you, all at very reasonable pricing, because we're going to have all the pricing disclosed. That's the nice thing about this. As in a simple example, if somebody here in town were to get an MRI at a major entity, they don't know what it costs. In fact, if you ask your doctor how much does this visit cost, they go, well, what card's in your wallet, kind of a thing. But the way we function, everybody knows what everything costs. And lo and behold, instead of spending $1,800 for an MRI, you can actually get one for $395 if you knew how to find it, if you had that expertise. And that's part of the simplicity of what we've done, is take advantage of all these existing things that are eager for business, but the consumer can't find them. And now when you actually have a need, we can connect people quickly with the appropriate services, all at the best pricing.
When you go to a cash only or a cash and carry type situation, I think that mushroom into lowering the price of MRIs or doctor visits, etc.?
Oh, it already has. The perfect example is the microcosm, which is LASIK eye surgery. It's never been paid for by insurance. It's never been carried or protected by any other methodology than people just opting to have it done. And it used to be extremely costly. And over the years, its prices come down dramatically. The quality's skyrocketed. And now they're doing buy one, get ones and stuff like that. So that's a true commercial enterprise, the way that's functioning, independent of the rest of the medical world. That one little singular thing is a perfect demonstration of what happens when you unleash the market to make something, better, cheaper, faster, more appealing, no lines at the door. They can deliver the service. They know when to expand, everything. So the rest of the medical world could function similarly if we just allowed it to. And so that's what we've built as the sandbox for that to take place, so that all these separate entities, which are not those corporate monolithic entities, they're not inclined to play in that sandbox, but all the rest of the microbreweries of the world, the little independent furniture manufacturers, that kind of mentality, all of those medical practitioners that are of that ilk across the country, of which there's a ton, are all coming out of the woodwork because they're eager to participate in this march away from the idea that I need controlled health care. I need a healthy care strategy that I'm in control of. That's the bottom line.
Well, and that's what we've been discussing regarding control. People just need to, but as you say, sometimes they're so swamped with day-to-day, just trying to get by, what have you, that they don't have time. So, an organization such as yours who can make it simple to the consumer and explain it in simple terms would be fantastic. We've got a couple of more minutes in this segment, our last segment, Jeff. Is there anything else you'd like to get across before we go?
No, I mean, a lot of people sometimes have concerns or the fear of being on your own, but the luxury is you can see how it is and how you feel when you get to go somewhere, and you're really kind of the center of attention, and if you have the right funds to pay, you can get done what you need to get done. And I would tell everybody, think of it this way. If you're in a hospital environment, as an example, and you're trying to petition for something to happen, but your whole copay is a few $100s, and meanwhile, this big insurance company's going to pay like $110,000, let's say, compared to your couple hundred, who in the world do you think the hospital's paying attention to? But if you're the one who's going to deliver that $110,000 to them, and they don't have to realize that you had this medical cost sharing behind you to make sure you had the money to make that happen, but all they ever saw was you as the face of your situation, and you're the one with the money, you're really empowered and you feel comfortable in your situation that you're in control once again, and they're going to jump around at your beck and call for a change. And so it's all available so readily, and places have great pricing when you tell them you're going to pay cash, because it costs them money to collect their funds from an insurance company, from big entities like that. They have to jump through hoops, and they have to have staff to pay for to get that money collected. If you're just going to pay them right away, they love you, and that's why doctors are so excited to escape from the thought that they're going to get bought up and become an employee somewhere and give up their independent practice. So you're helping your local doctor in the same way you're helping your own self.
Well, I'm looking at your website. Again, folks, I urge you to go to healthexcellenceplus.com. And as we discussed earlier, I like the fact that you're in the wellness business, not like the big pharma and other companies. You don't want to keep us sick. You want to avoid these costs. As the number two here, because you can't avoid all medical costs, the thing to do is to try to prevent it.
Exactly, and that's everybody's ambition. But of course, not to be unrealistic, something may happen. So the best of all worlds is to be prepared for the worst, which is what we've done, but also focus on all of the ways we can avoid having to need that worst situation come true. And for many, it won't come true because of what they've done, and unfortunately, a handful will still have a problem anyway, in spite of their best efforts. But you got to set that right tone, and like anything, it needs to be a habit. If I'm eating badly and I think I can just take pills to offset it, I'm never going to improve my diet. So if you can internalize it on a regular basis, which is what our whole mechanism is to kind of be an ongoing tool, not just sitting in the background waiting for disaster to strike, you're going to have a good lifestyle on a regular basis. You're going to avoid a lot of problems. You're going to meet a lot of awesome people in the process that are all focused on health, which is going to help you, motivate you, and keep you on track and help you find the newest and best innovations that are out there than be stuck in yesterday's information and yesterday's news, because that's where they're still making money. They don't need you in the new age. They need you what you've been doing for a while. Let's keep you going on what you're on right now, because we're making good money on you. So you need to be in control. That's the bottom line, Nicholas.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate you coming on. Again, our guest was Jeff Kanter, go to his website, healthexcellenceplus.com. You'll see a Facebook and a LinkedIn and a Twitter icons. You can connect that way as well. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for having me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
You've been listening to Christian Revolt, Long Overdue. Y'all have a great weekend. Godspeed.
Join the Cavalcade to Freedom, the cavalcade back to constitutional government. Climb on board and do your part to proclaiming liberty throughout the land. Join and support Liberty Works Radio Network Fellowship. To view the strategic plan, to spread the word, and to get information on joining, go to www.libertyworksradionetwork.com or call the fellowship office at 410-857-5444. That's 410-857-5444. To join the Cavalcade to Freedom. America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
This is Randall Yearout on jurisdiction. When the U.S. territories applied for admission into the Union as states, the overarching principle that drove this decision was the desire to determine their own destinies and to be removed from what the U.S. Constitution calls the exclusive legislative jurisdiction of the Congress over the properties owned by the U.S. government. When what is now the state of Washington removed itself from this exclusive jurisdiction, it was required to write its own constitution, which would provide for a representative Republican form of government for its citizens, such is the case for every state which joined our Union. Today, our U.S. government officials and bureaucrats have lost sight of this fact and now want to reassert exclusive legislative jurisdiction over the states and turn them into administrative subdivisions as though we were territories again. Sorry, U.S. government, but the Constitution says you don't have that authority. And Americans are beginning to realize that our founders intended for the individual states to either succeed or fail based on their own laws and policies. If the people don't like the way a particular state operates, they can move to another one where they do. The way our federal government operates today, the entire nation either succeeds or fails based on the policies of 535 legislators in Washington, D.C. And from what we can see from its history of failed social policies, I don't think these guys could pour sand out of a boot if the directions were written on the heel. We need to replace the socialist mindset in Washington, D.C. and our state governments with a restored American view of law and government.
This constitutional message has been brought to you by the members of the Constitution Party. Visit us at www.constitutionparty.com.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
In 1987, some inner-city first graders were promised a college education. Now, this promise didn't come from a wealthy corporation. It came from Oral Lee Brown, who saved a large portion of her modest income every year for these children.
She told Miss Brown, you can't do everything. I said, no, but we need to do more.
And she did more by sending 19 kids to college, helping others pass it on.
America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting. America, born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.
Overcoming. Pass it on. When Marlon Shirley was 5 years old. He was in an accident and lost his foot, but he didn't lose his heart.
When you tackle a challenge that you just cannot even fathom tackling, when you accomplish that, the amount of integrity and the will and the heart that you'll get from that experience is what will set you up for your life.
In less time than it took Marlon Shirley to say that, he can now run 100 meters because today he's the world's fastest amputee. Overcome it. Pass it on.
America. Born to freedom. The Liberty Revolution is on. Liberty Works Radio Network. Truth in broadcasting.